All good. Welcome to FMBug 71. I believe, as always, great presenters, interesting people here, lovely people here. For making the effort for coming, and we've got a full agenda. So yeah, Gary's going to kick off. I've lost my agenda. That's why I'm floundering around. I've lost the screen. Oh, there it is. Okay. So Gary's going to tell us some bits and bobs of news, which apparently he has cribbed from the Claris site. Sorry, Gary.
Most bits from Claris. That's true.
There's not many more people here than there were. And then Ian's going to talk about ChatGPT and FileMaker. I'm looking forward to that. There's got scheduled a quick discussion about best way to get calculated results into fields for various purposes, and an update on Dom server woes that we heard about last time. Yeah, Dom's shaking his head. I think that says it all. And then Doug's going to do a little talk on the Claris product update, recent one, and some new stuff. And then we're going to have a discussion about it, basically. So let's get in there without further ado. Gary, take it away.
Right, the news. Starting with the roadmap, but we've got a whole section on this. I had to leave with this because there's a major change from Claris on this one. Or not necessarily a change, an update, a side shift, a move, however you want to present it. So we will go over this in more detail around about 8:30-ish, fingers crossed, assuming we stick to schedule. I'll say Doug will do his presentation. I'm sure there will be lots of discussion and lots of talks about this after that, and we can then cover that off then. So what this means, I will say after Doug's presentation, I've put this slide up because there's two articles. We know data did an article, so did Line, and that gives a rundown of what it does, what's changed, and so forth. Again, we will cover this in more detail, but I put that slide up there. So if you've got reference points that you want to go back to, we will have that. I don't know if Doug's got any more in his presentation. He may do. That's fine. Known issue with printing from Claris, from Ventura. This is something that was done back in July. So late July, there was an update to this post. Something I want to make you aware of, that if you are running Ventura, obviously on a Mac and not on Windows, there are issues, some issues and workarounds on that. Have a look at that article, just be aware of it. As it says there, most of the issues have been addressed in some of Ventura updates, or they've been addressed by FileMaker update into 19.6.1. So as a consequence of that, just make you aware that if you are running Ventura and having printing difficulties, have a look at this, because I think that'll be some of the problems that you will have. Very quickly on the next one is Claris Engage. Put a page up for Claris Engage. Yay, well done. So there's now countdown clock. There's details on that site. There's various bits of information about what is happening. I believe speakers and other things will be added later. They're not there yet, but that's imminent. So that's on its way. And at least it gives an overview of what the event is going to be and how it's going to function. So I believe, well, Claris people can give more information on that later if they can. I believe it's not going to be as big an event as we had before, and it might be limited numbers. So do bear in mind that if you're in the UK and you are considering going, and it's worthwhile you going and you want to go, then you might want to get in early, so to make sure that you can attend. PHP no longer bundled with FileMaker Server. This thing I got off of the Claris engineering blog. I've known PHP is not part of server deployment, certainly on Ubuntu, and when you're running on the Linux platform, it's not there. But there's a whole thing and a whole article here about when it was last bundled. Now it's not bundled. It doesn't mean to say you can't use it. There is a way of using it. There are workarounds, but it's not just given by Claris now as part of the bundle application for custom web publishing. So if you do use PHP and you do need it, follow the article. It's quite a detailed, lengthy article which shows you a lot of information about how to apply this, how to install it, how to configure Claris to then use it. Obviously, it's not going to be something that by default is going to be supported anymore by Claris. So it's up to you. You can use it, but you have to then do your work around to follow it. The article is very, very good. It gives you all the information. So if you do need PHP, then do bear in mind. One thing I will add with the PHP is also do bear in mind which version of PHP you're running, because various levels of PHP has now been deprecated for support reasons. So as a consequence of that, then just make sure you're running the up-to-date versions of PHP. Don't go too far back. Other one that I noticed, which is a recent post for 2023 or 20.1, however you want to say the version numbers, it doesn't really matter. There are now additional logs that are generated. So there are now 6 logs. You get a changes log, a conversion log, import log, recover log, scripting errors log, and a transfer log. This article goes in details about what each one of those logs does, but this is extra information that FileMaker is now developing as part of their ongoing release map of not full version releases, and you get versions and upgrades. It's like pre-release stuff, and you're getting quicker versions and updates of this information. So worthwhile reading, certainly if you're like me, and I log an awful lot and we check things and make sure that systems are running correctly. We use Zabbix and we use other tools and stuff like that, but it's useful now that at least Claris are then putting out some of these logs for you. Some of them you will know, some are new, so, or updated. And I've got a question for the virtual bar later, and this is something that Penny and I have been debating for a little while now, that we've been looking at stuff, and it probably affects us more than most people because we run automated processes with bots and not necessarily always perform scripts on server. But we've noticed a few things of late, and it's I'd say since 1942, we've noticed areas that sometimes when we're running on a bot and say we've run an Apple script to tell Terminal to go and do something with the OS and then come back to FileMaker, if in our scripting we haven't brought FileMaker to the front, we believe, and I that's why I'm saying, is it a myth? So if anyone else can comment, I'd welcome their comment. We believe that it actually functions better if you can then tell your scripting to bring FileMaker to the front afterwards. And certainly whatever you do, don't hide FileMaker, because that causes no end of problems. Certainly if you go to get current windows and stuff like that and you've got FileMaker hidden, that causes you problems. But it's something I wanted to highlight. I'm happy to have a discussion after it, not now, that's fine. But we believe, I don't know, we're not sure it is a myth, but it might be. But it's whether or not anyone else has had an impact on that or had any feedback that it can do. Certainly from Claris coming back to it. Doug, if you've heard anything with this, then you can comment, and maybe later we can go through it. So cool. Obviously, dates of the diary.
Just going to say, Christian just commented on that in the chat.
Okay, cool, excellent. So thank you, Christian. So dates of the diary, pause and error. I don't know whether it's full or not yet, but it may be still have slots available. I'm not entirely sure. Obviously, we've got Engage EU is there, and obviously we've got Claris next year. So they're the only ones I'm aware of. Please tell me if I've missed any, but I believe they're the ones out there. And I have updated the slide this time of removing the ones that have expired. So there's no point telling you about events that had already gone. And that is it. I'll say more discussions in the bar. And that is pretty much the news. So whistle stop tour of that, and that's where we are. So I will hand it back to you, Jul.
Thanks, Gary. That was a good quick roundup. Yep. Nice to have that. Should we get straight into your talk, Ian, as we're now slightly behind, but if you're ready to go, let's get straight in. I think you gave this talk at dotFMP
Disk
update
on Friday. So yes, so I'm kind of, it's a little bit updated. Essentially it's my Berlin talk, updated a bit. So some of you may have already seen this.
Not me.
Potentially a couple of times, but anyway, okay, I'll just share if I can share my screen. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Cool.
Yep.
Right, so what I'm gonna do is it's mostly going to be PowerPoint with a bit in FileMaker. And as I say, this is substantially the same talk as I gave in Berlin, but there's been a lot of quite rapid change since then. And so it's updated in several places to reflect those changes. But there's still a lot of areas where I guess I'm asking questions more than giving answers. Okay, so essentially, given it was at dotFMP developer conference, I thought that this quote from Satya Nadella was quite nice, because it really did feel with the large language models that it is like a major platform shift, and it's one of those things that to me it feels kind of like, well, I'm old enough. I remember the first time I used the Mac operating system after DOS. It feels like that kind of change, you know, moving to a GUI from a command line, but in a different way. So I think actually all of you already know me, so I'll just kind of skip through this pretty quickly. The one thing here that's changed is that the product idea that I've been working on is going to be, I'm going to have that released in time for Antwerp, for Engage EU. So the final shape of it is still to be decided, but there's a couple of decisions left to be made in terms of the precise business model, which will affect how it looks. But anyway, so given dotFMP is all about the chaos, as Egbert said, what I did was I tried to provide kind of a pre-chaos agenda. Basically, we're going to talk about what are large language models, kind of where are things now, and what's the direction of travel, where are they going? How do we integrate this stuff with Claris and FileMaker Pro, and then also the elephant in the room. And I also want to warn you a little bit, in a number of places, what I'm doing with the content is I'm saying things that are deliberate simplifications. So they're not necessarily 100% strictly speaking true, but they're things that can give you a sort of a useful mental model or perspective or frame to view things. So just 1 second, I'm just going to shut the window here. Right. I'm primarily going to talk about, in most cases, I talk about ChatGPT and OpenAI, and they're not the only large language model, but at the time they were the preeminent one. So a lot of it refers to OpenAI and ChatGPT. In any event, OpenAI, the company, they provide a large language model that underpins ChatGPT, and there are a lot of other models, large language models as well, that also exist. They also provide an API that uses the large language model, and we can access that from FileMaker. So ChatGPT is a chat product built on top of the large language model. And a lot of people conflate them and get them a bit confused, that they are two distinct things. And so the large language model is built on top of a neural network. So that will be TensorFlow or Keras or something along those lines. And the GPT refers to generative pre-trained transformer. And this was a model architecture that was actually invented by Google. A number of Google employees, as well as some people from University of Toronto, came out with a paper entitled "Attention is All You Need," and it basically invented this structure. And once it was out in the wild, people like OpenAI took this structure invented by Google and have implemented it very, very well. And this is what the model architecture looks like. And now we're not going to be working at that level of detail, so it doesn't really, the precise details don't matter too much to us. However, the thing is that the structure is out in the wild. And once Google released it out in the wild, anybody could build with it. Now, to build the large language models, it takes a huge amount of computing horsepower and is tremendously expensive to build them. So not that many people have. And this is the paper. So I've seen a couple of suggestions that with people saying that there are likely to be Nobel Prizes awarded to some of the people on that the impact of it's been so huge. So if you look at what is a large language model from a different perspective, Wikipedia says a language model is a probability distribution over sequences of words. So fundamentally, when we've got a sentence, if you've got a couple of words, there's a range of probabilities for the different sentences that might follow and make sense. And Stephen Wolfram basically phrased it like this. He's saying what it's fundamentally trying to do is produce a reasonable continuation of whatever text it's got so far, what makes the most sense for the next word to add to it. He's written a short book called What is ChatGPT Doing and Why Does It Work? And it's really good. It's really accessible. The only issue I had with it was that his code examples are in the Wolfram language, which I don't have, but I still found it quite useful and very, very informative. So I quite recommend that. And so summarize, what it's trying to do is to predict what the next word should be in a sequence of words, and it does that over and over and over again. So if we start off saying once, the next word, there would be next following words to follow that would make sense, and they've got different probabilities of happening. So if we say once upon, then the next word, the probability of the next word has changed because we've now got that second word. So if we say once upon, and then a time would be what normally we would expect to see kind of follow on from that as being the most probable. But if we look something else, if we said fourscore and, when I said that in Berlin at dotFMP, most of the European people didn't really have a sense of what the next word should be, whereas every single American in the room was certain that the next word would be 7. So it's quite context sensitive, and it depends. Yeah, very context sensitive. It's a model of reality. So it's a statistical model. It produces text that plausibly matches the input. One of the striking things is that it gives really, really highly confident, plausible sounding answers, even if it's wrong. They sound incredibly confident and plausible. The data is trained up to a specific date, so it can't actually answer any questions after that point. The predictions are not universally true. It's prone to hallucinations. It's really not good with factual information. So relying on these models for facts is not a good idea. And if you want to use your own data, you need to use some additional techniques. And that's also how you get it to answer questions that are after the date that it was trained up to. So I had this quite a good example. I was writing a FileMaker script. I had ChatGPT open, and I needed to know whether the currently open window was a card window before I did something, before I tried to open another window or go to related record or something on those. I can't remember the exact details. So I asked ChatGPT, how do I know whether the current open window is a card window or not? And it told me. And it gave me a really, really very thorough answer. It said that I can determine it using the get window type function in FileMaker Pro, which returns a number indicating that the type of the current window. Gives me the possible return values for this, and it even gave me a script example. So I thought this is really, really good. And if we look at that part in more minor detail, how many of you can spot the problem? Okay, Ben? Oh, I guess Ben's.
It's not just because I've seen the talk before. I saw it last time too.
Okay. Okay.
I did
And the
spot it in
problem,
Berlin.
yeah. The problem is that get window type is not a FileMaker function. It sounds like one, but I didn't spot it until I actually went and tried to use it. Get window style is the correct FileMaker function. So I asked ChatGPT about that. And here's what it told me about get window style. It gave me zero based, so it gave me the six different return values for it. And there is another minor problem with that if you look at ChatGPT on the left and the Claris help on the right, you'll notice that there's only 4 possible return values for that function, whereas ChatGPT gave us 6. So not only is it kind of made up a whole new function, when we asked about the existing function, it made up different return values. And then everyone, I'm sure, heard about this, where the lawyer asked ChatGPT about court citations, and it just made stuff up. So basically, it can frequently be kind of an asshole. It will make stuff up. And this is the hallucination problem. And so if it hallucinates and is only good up to certain dates, what's it good for? Well, if we've got clear bounded areas of domain knowledge that are quite well understood, it's like SQL, JavaScript, Python, it's really, really good. And so it's got the fastest growing user base ever. And with Roger's diffusion model, it's kind of has very, very quickly gone through innovators, early adopters to an early majority very, very quickly. I should have taken this slide out, but I actually found it really, really interesting, and I could possibly do a talk on this slide and the adoption. But that's a topic for a different day. So they had over 1 million users in less than 5 days from when they released it publicly, and over 100 million in 2 months. So that's just huge, huge growth. And there was the week before I spoke in Berlin, there was a leaked Google strategy paper, and the Google strategy paper basically said that they were in big, big trouble, that they needed a larger competitive moat, that with large language models, that they were quite worried actually about their business model with search, and how they're going to compete. But the interesting thing is the paper also said that the problem doesn't apply to them, it also applies to OpenAI. And part of the reason for that was the advent of the open source models. This was something that Google talked about at the time, that there were open source models that were really, really good, and they're getting better very, very fast. And so since then, Meta recently released Llama 2, and it's pretty close to as good as ChatGPT 4. And it's got very, very generous license terms. Anyone with less than 700 million users, customers can use it without paying them licensing fees. So obviously 700 million customers is intended to stop companies like Apple, Google, OpenAI, and the like from using it. We've also got Claude, which is currently in beta from Anthropic. And for certain types of complex queries, it seems to be better than ChatGPT. I was looking at a couple of people who were using it for business strategy type queries, and they said that that OpenAI, well, essentially OpenAI and ChatGPT, if you view it as being like the kind of answers you get from it would be like if you had an enthusiastic, very confident new grad out of university, that it's going to be highly confident, but there may not be a lot of detail behind it. And in this case, they're saying for strategic questions that ChatGPT completely missed all the second order effects from what they were discussing, whereas Claude seemed to be quite good at pulling out second order effects and even some third order effects of the things they were discussing. So it's currently in beta. If you're in the UK or the United States, or presumably Canada, it's available for open beta for free. So it's worth signing up just to give it a try. Hugging Face has got a lot of open source models where they're hosting inference. And what we're also now seeing are special purpose models. Pardon me. So Bloomberg has built a large language model specifically for finance. And the thing is that these special purpose models are going to be trained for task specific stuff. So if you're doing anything with finance, the Bloomberg model is going to be way, way better than ChatGPT. Because Bloomberg is not noted for being inexpensive, several people have taken Llama 2 and are producing FinGPT, which is an open source finance GPT model. Likewise, Code Llama is a version of Llama 2 optimized for generating code, writing JavaScript or Python code. So the special purpose models, if you're doing any kind of specific task that has a special purpose model already, that's going to be much better than using a general purpose model. So the open source models are catching up really, really fast. This chart is out of date, but at the time, Llama 13b was the first public release version of Llama, and at the time, it was initially ranked as being about 68% as good as ChatGPT 4. 2 weeks later, it had improved to 76%. And then Vicuna, which is essentially a further development, only a week later, had already reached 92% as good. And they're saying that the Google Bard was about 93% as good. So the open source models are catching up super fast. One of the things here as well is that ChatGPT 4 is actually not a single model. It's ChatGPT 4 is a revised architecture that uses a number of GPT 3.5 models working together in concert. But once people realized what OpenAI was doing with that, the thing is that can be done, that similar architecture can be done with open source models. So people were expecting that we could get even further improvements from those. So they're catching up really fast. Yeah, so there's too many open source models to list here, and there's just more all the time. And the ecosystem is exploding. There's a lot of stuff going on. So Chroma, Weaviate, Pinecone are their vector databases. I'll get to the topic of vector databases later on in the talk. LangChain is a Python module that allows us, it abstracts managing a lot of the issues with communicating with either OpenAI or other models to function as an agent. So one of the issues you have when interacting with the APIs is the number of tokens that you can pass in. Tokens, they don't correspond exactly to words, but kind of roughly to words. But most models are quite limited in how much you can feed in one chunk. So LangChain's got a bunch of tools behind it that can allow you to split those things up and feed it in chunks and manage reassembling everything together. So that's what I've been using for most of my work. Hugging Face basically hosts a load of open source models. And the question is really, do you want to host your own? When I heard that Llama 2 was released, I thought, oh, great, I'll install it. And so I installed it on my MacBook Pro. which has a GPU. But what I found is that the amount of computing horsepower these models require to actually be really, really effective is enormous. So until I actually played with it, I thought, oh great, we're going to have this all on our computers really, really soon. I'm not so sure now, because it seems to take a great amount of power. And then to take advantage of that, you really need a GPU. And if you look at kind of even like sort of a relatively low end NVIDIA GPU, £7,700, it's over $10,000. And the GPUs pretty much are required to, if you're going to do any kind of model training, they're required. So that GPU compared to my MacBook would be approximately 250 times as fast for training a model. So fine tuning and training models do pretty much require GPUs. And so in those cases, some kind of hosting is probably going to be the way to go. Now, AWS have kind of come down on, they've actually, they're basically providing the ability to host these things. So within SageMaker, but you can see that generally the cost of a GPU hosted is sort of ranges generally between about 50 cents an hour to $1.50 an hour. So it can get expensive fairly quickly if someone's doing a lot of training or a lot of inference. But hosting on SageMaker, if somebody needs to do their own, is probably a logical way to go, though there are other competitors in that space as well. So if I want to use my own data, you've really got three basic approaches. What you can do is you can do pass in the information in the prompts, where you're feeding in the data in the questions. And you're seeing a lot of talk about sort of prompt hacking and how do you design prompts to be effective. And it can make a big, big difference in how effective a good prompt makes an enormous difference. But you are dealing with issues around the size limits with the number of tokens. The second approach is something known as retrieval augmented generation, or RAG. And in this case, what you do is you query the data somewhere else. You end up getting a subset of the data that you want to work with, and then you pass that into the large language model, and it generates your output text. And this is where vector databases come into it. And I will be showing a demo of this in a couple of minutes. The final approach is to fine-tune a model, where you would use transfer learning to retrain an existing model. Because the thing is that the existing models, they already know how to produce sentences, how to do all this. What they're missing is the stuff around the facts and the context of your data. But if you retrain a model with your data, then you can get kind of the best of both worlds. But data quality and quantity are really, really important here. That I'm sure we've all seen a lot of customer systems where people have been really, really careless with FileMaker data over time, where they've got text data or even container data stuck into numeric fields, or just data quality problems. So that's really important with fine-tuning a model. There are other issues as well in terms of the rate of change with an industry, of how fast does an industry change. A few years ago, when I interviewed somebody for my dissertation, they were looking at computer vision models, but one of their customers was in the fashion business. So they're saying that their models, they'd build a model and the model would be out of date inside 6 months. So they had to keep regenerating new models all the time. Anybody working in finance is going to be also in kind of an arms race with building models, and fraud detection models as well are kind of an arms race to build a better model. So OpenAI provides an API which you can access via curl, and this is what the command looks like. It's pretty straightforward. curl api.openai.com and the completions endpoint. The content type is JSON. We have to pass in a bearer token with your OpenAPI key and OpenAI key. You specify which kind of model you want to use and which what the message is, and then the temperature. The temperature you could liken to a degree of randomness. If you're doing a query where you wanted to query something that was very factual, so if you'd got a fine-tuned model about how you're with company data, you'd want to set the temperature really low to probably 0 to get a minimum of randomness in there. If you were asking it to write poetry, then you would pass in a much higher temperature, say 0.7, something like that. So the temperature will range between 0 and 1. So to give you an example here where what I did was I edited the FileMaker database schema, where what I did was I asked ChatGPT to give me the database schema in an XML snippet format and pass that to the clipboard. Sorry, then I used the Monkey Bread plugin to copy it to the clipboard. So you can see here it's saying define a database schema should include some information on customer fields. And what I did was I passed it in an example of what the the FMXML snippet looks like. So if I just, this is quite slow, by the way. Some of the complex queries like this can be very slow. So I'm just going to hurry it up a bit because you don't want to wait 2 minutes watching a progress bar. So basically, oops, sorry. Try to find the right place to stop it. Well, essentially what it did was it copied to the clipboard and I just pasted it into the FileMaker database. The next one I did was I revised that a bit and I thought, well, I don't want to copy and paste. FileMaker has an OData API that allows me to alter the schema directly. So I then, basically you can see we've got 2 database tables here. And again, what I did was I gave it an example. And I think I speeded this one up a bit. And you can see that it altered the schema. The next example, what I did was I basically went from images. So I went to the dotFMP website. I took images of all of the sessions. I basically put them into a FileMaker database. I used the FileMaker function to extract the text from the image. And then I'm doing semantic search on that. And this is just going to be I'm just going to show the trailer for my my Berlin dotFMP talk, if you don't mind. Pardon me. I'm just doing it this way because this actually took quite a while to work. Like it took about 5 minutes with the queries to OpenAI. So even with OpenAI using all that computing horsepower, if I'd run something like this locally, it would have taken, I'm certain it would have taken ages. So you can see it's just doing a lot of queries. And then what it did was, so essentially what we're doing was we extracted from an image structured data into a FileMaker system. And this is very roughly what the architecture of that looks like. That on the left-hand side, we've got FileMaker. So we've got the image in FileMaker in a container. We extract the image, text from the image. We pass that to OpenAI to extract structured data. I'll show you the query in a second. We retrieve the data back into FileMaker. Given our text data, I then query OpenAI to get the text embeddings, which I'm then storing in Pinecone, which is a vector database. And so that's kind of the data extraction and preparation side of things. And to then query it, essentially what I do is I take a text query from the user. I get the embeddings of the text query. And once I've got the embeddings of the text query, I can then just issue that query against Pinecone, which will find me the matching embeddings. And what that does is it returns me the record keys of the records that I'm interested in FileMaker. So if I just go to FileMaker for a second, let's make this a bit bigger. So you can see I've got 21 records here. That's just a short example. We've got this image that I extracted the text from the images using the FileMaker function. I can't quite remember what it's called, but so you can see we've got all the talks. And if I enter a query here, say, who talked about privacy and human rights. And if I query, what it's doing is it's converting that, the text. And you can see that it's given me the closest match is Heidi's talk about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and how we're going to talk about computer security. I asked to return 4 results. So the other results are you can see they're less close matches. And Keynote, right? Sorry. So the embedding is it's a vector representation of an input. What we're doing, sorry, the slides are in the wrong order here. This was the query that I passed into the OpenAI API to extract the data. So I said, I'd like to extract some data from text. I'll give you a description of the information and you'll return the information structured as JSON in the following format. So then following that, I basically fed it that plus the text result. And then what it returned to me was a JSON object that I could then extract those fields from. But the vector, so you could view it as being, it's a function where we would pass in an object and it's going to return the object as a vector. The vector will be an array of numbers between 0 and 1. And in the case of the embedding model that I used, it has 1,532 dimensions in the vector. And so each piece of text you pass in is going to produce a different vector. And we can't really visualize what 1,532 dimensions look like. But if we just flattened it to 2 dimensions and looked at it that way, this can give you a way of visualizing it. So you can see that down in the lower left, that if we've got where it's saying a man is walking in the field, you can see that would have sort of sit at that particular point. But if it said a dog is walking past a field, that would be at a different point, though it's similar along one of the dimensions. Likewise, a little boy is running is pretty close to a man is walking in the field, and a little boy is walking is a bit further away. And then you can see the one about the cat is quite far. So given these vectors, what we try to do is to find which ones are closest together. And fundamentally, the ones that are closest together are the closest semantically in terms of meaning. That's what it's giving us. So different models are going to produce different embeddings. So in this case, I use the OpenAI embeddings just because they're really, really handy and quick to implement. But most of the other stuff I'm doing is using a different model called Sentence Transformer. And so actually we've seen that. And actually, if I just go back to FileMaker again for a second. So I give the example here of what does the embedding look like. That in this case, if I just click on that, that is the embedding for that sentence that's been returned. So what we're trying to do when we query Pinecone, the database, is it tries to return the vectors that are as close to that as we can possibly get, or rather, it returns a measure of closeness to the vectors. And so that's something we can't really do in FileMaker, but the vector databases they're designed specifically for this kind of thing. So I've used Pinecone, which is a hosted vector database, but there are a number of others that are open source. Chroma is an open source one, but I kind of feel like I'm already sort of hosting enough stuff, so I'd prefer just to use something that's already hosted. There's other systems like FAISS, which is from Meta. Meta has been surprisingly open about releasing stuff for the public to use with no charge. So I suspect they're doing that to try to mess up OpenAI to some extent. So one of the questions, and I don't really have an answer for this, is that basically, is this just another UI? The guys at Nielsen Norman Group have actually written some really interesting stuff on this kind of topic. And they're saying that they think this is the first major paradigm change in computer interfaces since the graphic user interface. So yeah, so I think it's going to be interesting how people interact with this, because it's not just about chat. That I think is just one use case for it. So I think it's going to be very interesting how we interface with it. Now, with writing the queries, one of the other things that Nielsen Norman Group said was, they said that their research indicated that in the industrialized Western world, they felt that only about 45% of people could produce written writing that was clear enough to allow them to effectively instruct a large language model. Because if the interface is now text, the ability to express your thoughts clearly is really, really important. And that kind of ties in with my next about the elephant in the room. And basically, this is going to change the world of software development out of all recognition over the next 10 years. But as FileMaker developers, again, as so often the case, it comes back to the requirements, that the fact that these systems can write code pretty well already and are going to be able to write code much better in the future, it still boils down to how do we express the requirements in a really, really clear way. And as in so many projects, it's always the requirements that seem to be the problems. That yeah, I think it's actually a rare project that I can think of that has a lot of technical things that really, really, truly block it. But almost all the issues crop up as a result of disagreements over requirements or how requirements are expressed or how they're interpreted. So if people have difficulty interpreting requirements, I think that these systems are going to have great difficulty in interpreting requirements as well. But the other aspect of this is that if the cost of software development goes down, what does this mean for low code systems? That if the main advantage of low code systems was the reduction in the cost of development, if AI enabled systems are going to be able to reduce the cost of development dramatically anyway, what are low code systems going to do to compete? Because it means that they're going to become relatively more expensive than when compared to the alternatives. So don't have an answer, but it's just sort of an interesting sort of question, I think. That I guess we'll sort of see how that goes in the future. And this is the Stephen Wolfram book that I'd recommend. It's really, really good. So that basically covers it for my current talk. The one I'm going to be giving in Antwerp is going to go into more detail in several areas, but it's also going to look again at computer vision type stuff and how that all fits in. So thank you very much for your time, and thanks for listening.
Thank you, Ian. That was absolutely fascinating. Interesting to me, particularly because I started out in AI in the 80s.
Hang on. Sorry, I've lost my mouse. It's out there.
Yeah, I started out looking at AI in the 80s in its very infant days. And also vector databases as well were being talked about at that time. And it's taken till now to get these things really to this point.
Mm-hmm.
And it's now proving that law that things increase exponentially.
Yeah, well, it's actually one of the funny things was that it's my father when he died a couple of years ago. Before he did, he was still lucid enough to complain vigorously to me that I used the phrase AI in my dissertation title. He didn't, but he'd done a lot of things that we would now describe as machine learning. Mm-hmm. In terms of predicting in industrial environments a long time ago. But obviously now things have moved on a long way. So it's quite interesting to see how rapidly it's changing. Yeah,
it is. And I think you're probably right. I think it's going to be a huge shift in the way that programming's done.
Basically, the product idea I've been working on, basically, the natural language processing stuff. Mm-hmm. I basically have rewritten over 90% of it in the last 6 months, just because of the advent of large language models. A lot of the stuff that I had to do before just is no longer necessary, and some of the stuff that was hard is now I just ask. I just ask a large language model, and it can, give an answer. So it's I found it quite remarkable.
It is. As a question I had, do all the large language models suffer from the tendency to make things up confidently?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, what you can do in the prompts, there are things that can be done in the prompts to counteract that. I didn't really go into this because at dotFMP, Joris did a session on interacting with ChatGPT, and we kind of coordinated sessions to minimize the overlap.
Yeah.
So they kind of nestled together. But what you can do is that even adding in statements like apparently that the phrase "let's think this through in stages" is apparently like a magic thing that will actually make it give better answers. Telling it that if you do not know the answer, say "I do not know," rather than making things up, is also another technique that works. It doesn't make things go away entirely, but
that's interesting. Yeah,
because I think one of the other ones is that kind of like almost like a recursive kind of approach where you issue several queries. That what you can do is look at the answer and say, okay, you gave me this answer. Is there anything wrong with your answer? Or critique your answer. And in some cases, apparently, basically, if it's given you a wrong answer, it will just straight up tell you my answer is right. So yeah, so a great deal of care is needed around the prompting.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Have other people got some questions? I know I could just sit here and talk to Ian for quite a while. Anyone?
I haven't got a question, but I'm intrigued. So you've sparked my interest of where you should and shouldn't use it. So I think that's the point. I think it's made me realize it's like the buzz is, oh, this is the new level. It's like AI is here. It's like Google's just announced one for Gmail. So it's a back end to Gmail to then help you compile and answer emails as they come in automatically. It's like, okay, so and they demo it of having a string of a very lengthy conversation, and you can then just click the AI box to just go summarize the whole email for me into a paragraph, and it will go summarize I don't know 15 or 20 conversation email into a paragraph of things that it feels you should be alerted to, which to me that seems a great idea because it's based on fact.
Yes.
Based on stuff that's there that it's reading.
It's based on the context that it's got right there to hand.
Yeah, and to me that seems good. When you're just going asking, shall we say, the internet a generalized question to go get something, as you said at the start of your demo, is the fact that it will give a plausible answer that seems very, very true, and it's constructed in a way that seems absolutely plausible to the end user that's reading it. But unless that context is checked and verified, it could be an absolute made up set of results that it generates back.
The other thing we discussed a bit in Berlin, that one of the questions that came up was that with the training data, because it was trained on a lot of data from the internet, that if you think that if a lot of the training data came from places like Stack Overflow or Reddit, these are places where people tend to post highly confident answers, and the way things are phrased is usually highly confident, whether it's correct or not. If that was used as a lot of the training data, that tendency may spill over into how questions tend to be answered.
I think you'll just get the highest hit ratio of what it feels is correct. It doesn't mean to say it's right. That's the thing. I think it absolutely is, as you say, it's plausible. Like if you're looking at Python, something with some structured code behind it, that's a different methodology because there are set answers, there's set guidance that it will follow. So as a byproduct of that, you've almost got a much higher hit rate. So
the other thing they did with languages like Python and JavaScript is that early on it looked like that was going to be a really, really good use case. So a lot of custom training was done. So they basically were training the models, and where there are issues, they would have really, really good developers go in and look at the code and basically correct the code for the model to say, no, this is how it should look, and then feed that back in. So there was a lot of highly specific training for some of these use cases.
What, so they took the model and then trained it again to then answer correctly?
Well,
or they just query the initial response was incorrect and then flagged it.
What they would do is they would sort of flag that the initial response is incorrect, but then they could have a developer say, okay, for the ones that it produced incorrect answers, what would a correct answer look like? and then go and use that then what they do is they could take that problem with the correct answer and feed that back into the training data for the next time. So the model is going to get better.
Okay. And is there an inference then that second response is then more valid than the first one, if you see what I mean? Because if it's a sliding responses.
Yeah, this is part of the training process. So that kind of stuff would have happened a lot. And then that sort of would be embedded in the model, which is at a point in time, whatever point in time they finish training it.
Yeah. Okay.
So
intriguing talk, mate. Yeah.
But I think really it is that understanding that there are limits and there are things that it will be good for and things that it should not be used for. And I think at this point, say, sitting down, and I've seen a lot of people saying, oh, use it for your marketing. And essentially what it produces is the kind of fairly anonymous, meaningless sounding, buzzword laden stuff that makes people think marketing strategies are mostly BS.
Ian?
From
Yeah, just on the marketing thing, it's funny because I asked after Berlin, I asked my family on a chat group who's using ChatGPT already, and my 19-year-old nephew who's just started working for a big corporation, he just uses it to write his emails. He's 19. He's like, it's just some business email. So ChatGPT, write me an email with this. Fine, send it off.
Okay.
And that's it, just to the use case. And he's 19. He'll be fine with it. And but my 30-year-old daughter, one specific thing, she has a startup. They're a smart bunch, startup company. And she mentioned that they use it for marketing blurb. Right, but I think the way they use it is it's like a really handy sort of when you're just having a meeting and coming up with ideas. They're having ideas, and they also ask ChatGPT to come up with some ideas. So that throws it into the room as a kind of another thing to think about, and then they take that and then that's a cool idea, and then they won't just use it directly hooked up to the website.
That's the correct kind of way to use it for that type of purpose.
Yeah, that's what I want. So there is a use case that I'm saying, and personally, I found it really useful in that kind of way to get ideas or a bit of coding or just stuck somewhere. And I try and keep it very specific and small, come up with a function like JavaScript function to do this, try and be specific. It can put in some test data. You can test it right away. If it works, I'll use it, not trying to ask it to write a whole program.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, actually, I found it
like an assistant.
I found it really, really useful for regular expressions, which I basically hate, and also for XML parsing, which again I hate. And I basically passed it in a chunk of XML, said here's the XML, and then here's the value I want out of it, and then it told me here's how you get that value. So that was. Sorry, Rosemary's just written a comment in the chat. So I just gotta get my glasses. Yeah, I know a university professor asked for a syllabus and lecture plans for an ethics class she teaches. Response was, it's a good start, but needs refinement. It can be quite good for getting feedback on documents. There have been a couple of emails I've written to people, and I'm thinking I'm not quite sure on the tone, and have asked it, and it's been quite handy in sort of suggesting refinements to make it a bit better.
I think, as you said, you got to think about the context of what you're using and what the data source is that it's getting it from. And I think if you think it's in a controlled environment in some respects, whether you can know that before you ask the question, I think is the lead thing. I think if you can justify it's right. I know, as I say, the email stuff I've seen from Google and the stuff I've seen from that is based in the context of what is on the screen in that conversation at that point in time. So therefore, it's dynamically building a model of, I don't know, the 5 emails that were in front of it.
Mm-hmm.
I would hope that's more accurate than it going out and then saying, right, I've go, because someone referenced a word in there, I'll go to the internet and then work out all the nuances of that word and then come back and then present a new model of what you want to do. That's out of context completely.
Yes.
And I think that's where everyone should be mindful about how this gets used and where it gets used.
Oh, there's one other place to be really, really careful. if you're using it for writing code, you now need to be extra careful about not putting your credentials or authentication of any kind in your source code. Because if you're using an AI enabled, it's reading your source code and it's passing that back to. So GitHub Copilot and what's the other one? Cody, I think is the other one. They both have ignore files. So similar to Git, you can have like an ignore file for the AI code assistant as well. And what that'll do is you can basically say, do not read this file of my source code because it's got stuff in there that I do not want you to see. Same way, just exactly the same as you do with Git.
Okay.
So actually, in your case, Gary, if you've got a bunch of developers working on stuff, if they're starting to look at that, it's probably something to just flag up.
Yeah. They've got any credentials in your code, don't use it, basically. And I'm sure there's many people here that have some credentials in their code, because there will be. So.
Well, the thing is that what I often do is that when I'm writing the first draft of something, I often do that rather just like really quickly hack it together, get it working, and then I take the credentials and stick them off in an environment file somewhere. But what I probably should be doing from now on is starting off with an environment file for those things.
Yep.
And importing that as my first step to.
It's the classic best practice, isn't it? It's the thing you should do ideally, but it's that thing that we do as FileMaker developers, then do something really quick and really fast, and the client says, oh, can you do this? And you go, yeah, I can get that done. And you can do a proof of concept really quickly, but you cut corners in delivering at that speed. So
yes. There's also been a paper a few months ago, somebody did a proof of concept of a software supply chain attack against NPM. So what they did was they asked ChatGPT and they put in a typo of a well-known package name, but with the typo, and asked it to write code. So it became aware of the basically incorrect package name. But once it was aware of that, then they went off and they could write a package with the incorrect name, stick it in a node package manager, and that could contain malicious code. I've got that paper somewhere. I've explained it really, really badly. But anyway.
So could you just clear something up for me, Ian? If you query, say, ChatGPT, and you give it some information during your query, does it retain that information?
They've recently become much more clear on that. If you're going through the API, they do not retain the information. If you're passing it into ChatGPT, if you retain your conversation, they're obviously keeping it if you keep the history of conversations.
Sure.
But they're also providing a mechanism where you can opt out of keeping the history. Just a sec. I'll see if I can find the URL. So yeah, they've got sort of some data controls. I've just stuck that in the chat.
Okay, great, thank you. Again,
But
this chat will be available to everyone on our website at some point. I'll try and get it up there quickly.
yeah, I'll
yes.
that.
Where is it? Somewhere they've got a page on the. Okay, actually that does go into a fair bit of detail. Yeah.
Okay.
This obviously, if you're integrating with your company's data, you need to think about what gets passed through quite carefully. What gets sent. So
Yeah, that answers my question directly. Yeah.
Okay.
Has anyone got any other questions for Ian right now, or shall we move on to the next thing? 'Cause we're slightly over schedule.
Sorry about that.
No, it's my fault.
That's fine.
I started asking questions, then Gary did.
Yeah.
So,
As
we're
we do.
here for. Well, we're here for this, so all good. Thank you, Ian. That was
Yeah,
very fine and really, really great talk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Now I've got to find my agenda. Let's just ChatGPT what's on my agenda.
Our quizzes, it's you, Jul.
Yeah, it's well, actually, technically, it's Dom. Dom asked me the other day because he's changing some of his calculations. He's got a lot of calculations from his old code, and just wants opinions on the best way of getting calculated results into fields. Obviously, this is going to be different for different situations. So if you've got things that are never going to change, things that are going to be looked at frequently and so forth. So I just kind of like to get a feel from out there from everyone, just an input from everyone about the best way of getting calculated data into fields. Feel free to just say, if it's this, then I do this, or whatever. So I'm going to throw it open to the room, and Dom, feel free to add any particulars you want to throw in.
Will do.
I can answer my view of how we use it across the suite that we use. Try and use actual calculations in FileMaker as a calculated field as minimum as possible. That's my view, unless you have to. And the reason why I say you have to, if there's dependencies on that are changing every second, you're going to have to then cater for that, which you can do with auto enter, but there are limitations on auto enter. So if, for example, auto enter, if you've got a third-party field that is part of that calculation, unless that third-party field that's a version off from that table, if you see what I mean, is then getting changed, that record is getting changed, then it's not going to fire the auto calculation. So you have to be mindful about what you're doing. If you're doing a calculation across a relationship, across the TO, that's across 5 files deep across where it's going, you could have a calculation at the first table that's pulling a result from a second table, which has then got a calculation in that field you're pulling, which is then from another table. Yes, any element of that would always calculate. So that's when you would use that. The downside is that's putting a huge burden on your result. So when you view that record, you've got to view the result across multiple tables. And as we all know, that FileMaker will bring forward the entire record set for that record. So if you've got a very large table with 700 fields wide, it's going to bring the result of all of that in to then do the calculation and process what it does. So we try and use auto enters where possible. And then other reasons why we would ever do it via scripting is if we've got a process that we're going through for our bots, for example, that are doing things and processes. If we're going through something in our scripting process and we go, we want this to fire a result, sometimes we will get the calculation and write that calculation on the fly in the script to a variable, and let the variable pick up the result and pass the result forward through scripts. So we don't actually write it into FileMaker. We write it dynamically through the script step. So that's more efficient as well, because then you're not writing any data to your actual file. So you're not holding that calculation. So you know that every time that script's run, it will run that calculation and resolve it. So I think there's many factors, depends on what you're doing. We are slowly moving away from most of our calculation fields, if possible, to auto enters or sets. And the sets you can do via the scripts. So you can have a script that goes through and sets the result to a global, to something else if you want to store it and then pass that on to another script at a later point. You do sets, or you can pass variables across to different script steps as well. So
yeah, I think this all comes from both an issue both of you have. You both have millions of records, so you don't want to be doing calculations wherever possible.
Agreed. You want to limit that as much as possible. Calculations and summaries, get rid of them. So,
well, I mean, it's exactly that. We want to display some real-time data, so we have an idea of how many orders have been collated, how many orders still need to be collated, the weight of those orders that's been collated, the value of the order that's been collated, the number of lines on the order that have been collated, the number of lines that haven't been collated. So that's some of the reasons we have in the past used calculations, and in order to try and resolve the ongoing server issue we've had with the server crashing, about 3 weeks ago, we went through one of the tables that had been identified as being problematic, and we removed all the field definitions for all the calculations in that table. And we converted a lot of them to auto-enter calculations, but that was an interim measure, to give us enough time to actually redesign those reports. So instead of looking at the live data, we will probably poll the live data every 5 or 10 minutes, bring some information into a separate table, and then perhaps do summaries and calculations on that smaller set of data, rather than risking going to a table that might have 2 million records in it. And that seemed to work for us for about 3 weeks. We managed to produce a great period of stability on our system doing that. Unfortunately, last Thursday, Friday, we had a couple more server crashes after 3 weeks of not having had crashes. But that's your approach, Gary, is exactly where we are going at the moment. We're now looking at producing more calculations via scripts and populating fields in that way. Particularly when you're talking about generating invoices, VAT breakdowns, VAT summaries, where you don't actually need to hold any of those values on a layout to show anyone until you've actually generated the invoice.
The other thing you do, Dom, is use scripts there for execute SQL. So we do that where you fire an SQL query against the table. That is not very burden on FileMaker. The server will do that in no time at all. Get your query right, and you'll get the results back. So you get a query string from execute SQL, which is way faster, a lot quicker.
I was going to say we do that all the time for the accounting systems. So execute SQL just bypasses all the TOs, all the tables, all the joins, all of the self calculations. You just go straight for the nuts and just say how many orders or what the total weight is. And it's pretty much instantaneous, and you just stick it on a button label. Problem goes away.
Yeah, I think it's part of what's caused our problem, but I'm not entirely sure. But I am happier to go down the scripting route than to use calculations at this point, that's for sure.
I'd say it depends on what you're doing. If you're doing mass reporting, I'm not saying that you move to something else. I'm not going to say that, but there is the point once you're moving huge amounts of data, no disrespect, unless you're really, really tight in the way you've built your systems in FileMaker, FileMaker may not be the tool for you. I know the Claris team would be going, hold on a sec, of course it is. But there is a point that
I'm shaking his head.
it will reach its limitation of what it can do. I'm not saying, but that limitation is vast. If you've built a system that's very clean and very efficient and very structured in your table creation, great. But 9 times out of 10, you're actually using tables that people are using and physically interacting with need to be linked to other systems and need to be linked to things to function. Now, if you can create a layout for that report that is very trim in its view, great, that works. But as I say, you're still going to pull all the data set for those records. So if you've got a very wide table, you're going to have a problem because you're pulling vast amounts of data and asking it to go do that calculation.
Sorry, Gary, when you're looking at another table, you're looking at the entire width of the table, regardless of how you're looking at it. You're taking.
If you pull a record, if you pull one record and you know the ID of the record, you go to that table and it's got one field in that TO, you'll pull the one piece of data. If that record is on a table that's 500 fields wide, you will get all 500 fields delivered to you.
Yeah.
You may only want one of them, but you will get all of them.
Right.
That's the way FileMaker works. So it really does come down to it. If you then say, right, I'd like to do a calculation on this field and I want to go to that table and there's 500,000 records in it and there's 500 fields in that table, you're going to pull 500,000 records of 500 fields wide. And the Claris people can tell me whether I'm right or wrong. That's the way I understand it. You'll get all that data back and it'll calculate it.
Right.
But all that data you're pulling back, you don't need.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, the other thing is we have started to be a lot more stringent in how much data we hold. We've got rid of some 12 million records, reduced the size of the databases, removed whole sets of tables. You know, we've done a lot of work stripping things down. But some of our tables and relationships are poorly thought out as they would have been because we started 8-9 years ago. And
it's the evolution, Dom. It's the evolution. We're all there.
We're all part of it. And we can see very clearly where we can improve things, but it's very difficult. It's like trying to fix a car when you're driving it.
I'll give you a little tip that one of the things we did, we created a reporting module in FileMaker. This is before I moved to Click and did a load of stuff in there. But the reporting module in FileMaker was a set of scripts that we set up to exfiltrate data from key tables, and we did it nightly. So we looked at it and said, what information do we need? Oh, we needed stats by week, by month, by whatever, every night, and we want it updated. So we pulled that data into a individual file. So we summarized all the data down. We're saying if we wanted our product category, we'd have 500,000 products. So that's what we have in the table. And then I said, well, what do I want? I want 1 week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 8 weeks. So I run SQL commands to then go run that, summarize that, and bring it into each of those fields. That process, yes, took an hour to run. Now I've got a table which has only got 500,000 records in, but it's summarizing the data from the 5 million, 10 million, 15 million record table. Now, when I do my reports, I look at that table and not the live data. So therefore, I move it away and obfuscate away. So,
I mean, for historical sales, we've done a similar sort of thing. We've created an inventory ledger. We archive the inventory ledger every day, so we have a summary of sales every day, not individual sales to
granular,
but cumulative sales over time, so we can do exactly what you said in relation to that. Our problem, I think, stemmed more from, as I say, wanting to give views on screens dotted about the warehouse and to allow people to look at the number of orders that were active and exactly what state they were in terms of number of lines picked. So people can see visually where we're at any time during the day and say, right, I've got to stop what I'm doing and I've got to go help collating. And I think we don't need to do it that way. We don't need to report on the live data. If we're only going to be refreshing that view every 5 minutes or 10 minutes, then possibly there's a whole different way to do it, which means that we don't have to use as many calculations or summary fields on the live data, but we could just pull that data into another table and then do the calculations and the summaries on what we can then be sure is a very limited set of data.
Well, go on.
Just one question. Something that we've done before is we've got the FileMaker front end that normally feeds an accounting system. I get an impression this is probably what you guys are doing.
Well, you should mention that.
Now, what happens is the overhead is getting the data in the FileMaker, and then the second overhead is importing it into the accounting system. Accounting systems, depending on what you're using, are actually designed to aggregate this stuff because you're supposed to get the ruddy thing out of the accounting system anyway. So instead of taking the headache and re-summarizing it in FileMaker, in certain circumstances, I found it actually better to just dump this or import the stuff into the accounting system and then just read the accounting system summary.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is one of the issues. This is the second issue we have with calculations, is where we're trying to take an order. We're trying to look at some line item values, summary of line item values. So we want to look at the weight picked from each line. We want to create a summary value for that because we want to use that to judge whether our lorries are going to be overweight. So we then have to take the summary from the line items, put that on the header record, and then summarize the header records in some way to see what the overall weight for the lorry will be. So we've had that issue of how do you get summaries of line items into header record tables. To come back to your point about accountancy systems, on the back of what problems we've had, we've been looking at NetSuite, SAP Business One, and then at the other end of the scale, Xero. Now, NetSuite and SAP Business One are a complete replacement of FileMaker. That's what we'd be looking at those for. And I'll talk about that perhaps a little bit later. Xero, we were thinking of just, well, why are we even bothering keeping invoiced orders in FileMaker? Just import them out, or export them out rather.
Yeah, feel free to roll into your update on your issue.
Well, that is the update, really. I mean, we've been talking to Claris continually about the problems, and it's been quite difficult to get as much guidance, perhaps, as I would have liked, because we're not just sitting here going, when are Claris going to fix our problem? We're sitting here working as hard as we can to try and resolve the issue ourselves. But of course, we're shooting in the dark a little bit without the guidance from Claris, because none of the diagnostic tools that are available to us have ever revealed a problem with any of the databases we've got. We had 2 databases that were crashing continually, or rather, one database was crashing a lot with a 618.681 error, often followed by a 701 error, with one of the database engines crashing, and that was our ordering database. And as I say, a few weeks ago, we went through, changed all the calculations in the order header table to auto enter calculations as an interim measure to creating those calculations in a different way. We had then 3 weeks of no crashes, but then unfortunately last Thursday, our server ground to a halt with duplicate users, duplicate IP addresses, and user experience was just getting degraded and everything was running slower and slower. So we had to reboot the server, quite painful. And then the day after that, we, for the first time in 3 weeks, had a 618.681 error, followed by a 701 error, but this time on the suppliers database rather than the ordering database. So at that point, I was pretty disheartened, to be honest with you, because I thought we'd cracked the problem, and I was very disappointed to see it come back, albeit against a different database. But this morning we've had some more news from Claris, who have.
You can't go into detail on that.
Well, I won't then. But we've had some news. But that's quite timely because we had some indicative pricing from NetSuite about a complete replacement for what we had written. And that came in at £300,000, and that was split 150 grand between an annual license, so 150 grand would be a repeating cost, and 150 grand in implementation and consultancy fees. That's quite a lot of money, really. You know, some of me would pay it just to get peace of mind and ensure that we had stability within the business. But of course, it actually would be an incredibly disruptive process for the business to go through. Because
let me throw one other thing in there, Dom, for you. That might be worthwhile. I had another scenario whereby I had large volumes of stuff that I needed to aggregate, and that's what you're doing. And that put an incredible amount of stress on the application and the box. So the other thing that I found was, in that particular scenario, as odd as this might sound, I used an external data source of Microsoft SQL Server.
Okay.
So the raw data in FileMaker was fine. You know, the line datas were fine. But it's when I came to just crunch it and get my cube out, it just struggled. So one thing that I found was actually get the line stuff in FileMaker, give them the user UI in the front end. Everyone's happy as little Larry. But then when I was ready, I dumped that stuff into Microsoft SQL Server as an ESS, and SQL just laps up OLAP and cubes. That's what it's designed for. So as a result of which, I took an immense amount of processing and overhead off the box and FileMaker altogether. So I just used FileMaker for what it was good at, which was just capturing the data in detail, and then I just dumped it into SQL. Now, the beauty of the SQL thing is, with the SQL Server, you've got something called reporting services, which you may or may not be aware of. It's a free of charge web-based reporting tool that it just comes with it, including the free version. So if you go and download Microsoft SQL Server community version, there's something called reporting services. Now the beauty of that is absolutely bang on for having a tablet up or a TV screen up with how many items are outstanding, how many pics are outstanding, what's the weight of this, because SQL Server, when you've dumped it in and it does the aggregation, the web browser bit is a view. So you don't have to have all these relationships and stuff that we do in FileMaker. You just create the view and the thing just ticks over and just updates automatically. And you can just get the browser to do it. So that's the other way that I've done it. And that's been very successful. So, and if you've got 300 grand to burn, give me a shout, buy me a pint. I might be able to show some off that.
Yeah.
Actually, I was just going to just to add.
Brilliant.
Just before you get in there, Ian, Dom, John's asked a question in the chat. Sorry, Ian. Go ahead.
What's the spec of so their spec of their server, John, is massive. They're running on a Mac Pro from Apple, so it's a high spec Mac Pro, and they've got 2 of them. So if I remember rightly, Dom.
Yeah, we've got we ran through servers quite quickly over the last few months. So started off with the Mac Pro, as you say, massive spec, really big. But then we went for a couple of Mac Studios with M2 chips and got very similar performance out of them for about a third of the cost. Yeah. So we have the Mac Pro's back up and running with the Intel chip. I don't know if it has any bearing on it, but it seems slightly more prone to the crash than the M2 Mac Studio with the M2 chip.
Yeah,
Ian, where you go first. That's cool.
okay. I just want to say that, yeah, when I was at Signal, what we did was we had a lot of reporting requirements. So I basically configured a data warehouse in SQL Server exactly as Ara described. SQL Server, we used mirror sync to replicate the core data every 10 minutes or so, or every 15 minutes, I can't remember, across the SQL Server tables. Was a one-way replication. And then when we wanted to report on the aggregate data, I just wrote some really, really basic SQL views in SQL Server. And then we kind of added those via ESS in FileMaker. So people had the aggregate data on some of the layouts. The live data was coming from FileMaker, but the aggregated data was actually coming from a SQL Server view. And that worked really, really well. A SQL Server for that kind of summarization over large volumes, super fast.
Because the other thing we're looking at possibly doing is to actually have the databases, the live databases, residing on a NAS box, and being able therefore to have some different ways of backing that data up that don't necessarily rely on a FileMaker style backup. So whether we'll ever get to that point, I'm not sure. I wasn't willing to take that step with our current problems because I didn't want to complicate the situation anymore. But yeah.
Dom, look, as I say, there's about 20 ways you can crack this, in my view. That's the thing. The data sets, I agree with what Ara's talking about. I agree with what Ian's talking about. Everyone knows my
I think Tony's also got his hand up on something.
Yeah, exactly. So what we do exactly the same thing with Click. I just will not report that amount of data in something else. So Click runs on Postgres, which is a very, very powerful database, very similar to SQL. So we do all of our dashboarding, all of our analytics through that. So I'm loading 500 million records into that thing, and it can crunch that in seconds. So when you're talking that amount of data, you just can't chuck that data at FileMaker. You give it to a tool that can do the job. Now, we've got dashboarding that we do as well. I'll quite happily then share some of the code that the guys have done with the dashboarding we've got through FileMaker. So we wanted a bit of a hybrid of both. So we've got our sales module that's got a couple of million records in it. And we're live dashboarding that. And I say live, what we do is we run it on our bots. Normally it takes around about 15 to 20 seconds to process that by execute SQL commands across a data set of that size. It's pulling from 3 different databases. So what we do is we go pull the individual data and summarize each database, and then use the end result of gluing that together with execute SQL from FileMaker, and that works fine. You get to larger and larger data sets, and what you want to do, then you're looking at other tools that do that. SQL is definitely, with the views, will crunch through that stuff in seconds. You'd be able to do that in no time at all. So that will obfuscate your data. Now you can do 2 ways of getting that data into SQL. You can do OData, which John will jump in and say you can use OData to pull your data from the actual data source into that module in SQL, and you could sync it that way. You've got ODBC, you've got standard. I found the fastest option is just export a merge file and import the damn thing. That's so fast. So either way, there's going to be an option for you. But I would say if you're really wanting live reporting on the tables, get FileMaker. If you're getting that size data sets, get FileMaker to be efficient to do your business function and let it do it. Pass that on to the things that have got the weight and the heavy lifting to be able to do that elsewhere.
Tony, you have your hand up.
Thank you. So Dom, sorry to hear you having a bumpy road there. I have to say that I've had 3 issues that were successfully resolved on the crashing side. So if I may, I'd like to just ask you a quick question. Do you have any ESS in the mix?
Have any
external SQL sources?
No.
Okay, all right, let's forget that one. The when I was doing when I do analytical stuff on a system to see if I can figure out what the heck is going on, I've got 4 tests that I do, maybe 5, but the top 4 are and I'm just going to checklist them. You've probably already done them. I'm going to ask anyhow. The verify, which covers the block structure of the files, and then the diagnostic recover, which looks at the internals of the blocks, is my understanding of how it works. 2 different levels to the block structure within a FileMaker file. Third, and this is, each one of these has occasionally been the tool that found the problem, the ability to generate an XML DDR successfully. Are you able to run a DDR for all the files successfully?
Yes, yep, we can.
Okay, all right, cross that one off the list. I had a good solution if that was not the answer. And then FMDiff, I haven't used it as much, but there's been at least one time when FMDiff by the late great Winford has identified things. So each and every single one of those 4 things has independently, ironically, located things. The other thing, this is kind of the 5th thing. Occasionally I've done this thing, loop through all the records. I did that at least once many years ago, where there was a system that was crashing, and I just wrote a script to have it go to the first record, go to the next, go to the next, go to the next, go to the next, and it crashed at a particular record point within. So that might be worth a shot in case the record is coming up occasionally. And then final. Beyond that, I would just, everything that everyone's saying about minimizing anything you can do to kind of draw your data on demand. Summary fields hidden behind a button. You don't need to see them every single time a record changes. Would potentially lighten the load. And I guess other than that, light some sage in the room and see if that helps.
Very quickly, verify. Every time we have a server crash, we verify the databases, and they have never shown a problem. Every time we have a crash, we run a recover on our databases to make sure that our backups will be okay, and we've never had a problem flagged up with that. DDR reports, we can run those on all of the databases, because in the past people have said, where your DDR report stops running, that's where you might see a problem. But
just to follow up, if I may, on the use of the word verify, and I would refer people to the white paper that was co-authored by Steve Blackwell and Wim DeCourt. Goes back maybe 10, 15 years or so. My understanding, happy to be corrected, is that the verify that is available through the server schedules is a top level that checks that blocks exist and the links between the starting block, the intermediate blocks, and the final block are accurate. There is what I call, for lack of a better term, a diagnostic recovery, which checks the internals, because the blocks, which are, I don't know, last I checked, they're 4K, they have internal structures. And those, you can have blocks that are happily and, blissfully locked, linked rather, and yet the structure within those blocks, and to do that, you need to kind of go to the recovery command and click some radio buttons, and it does drill down to a deeper level. So I would make sure that you're doing both the surface verify, I'll call it, and the deep verify. And then just final cool story is, at one point I had a 122 file system that I was upgrading, and something was glitchy, and Winford said, you should look at the value list, this particular value list with this particular name, and delete it. I deleted it, and the file, which could not convert, goes back, convert. So just a shout out. I mean, that was pretty amazing what he was able to do looking inside the files. All right. Anyway, yeah, 2 kinds of verify. Good luck on that.
Thank you.
That's great. I think if you're going to hang around with the virtual bar, we can take it further.
I was just going to say, Dom, stick around. If you can stick around, then let's have more of a discussion on this, because I think there's areas that I think everyone can chip in and demo. So stuff I'm not going to demo just on a whim, just in the middle of the recording, because I'll have to edit the code out. So, but I can certainly do it after the recording stops and go through some stuff that we do.
Great.
Thank you, guys.
Great. And thanks everyone for their comments and input there. Doug, sorry, we're a bit behind. You've been very patient. You've been listening to some slight flack for Claris very patiently. But
I was going through the notes. I was going through the notes of Dom and putting some stuff for the engineers to do. So I was going to that works.
Okay, great. Thanks. So take it away.
Cool. Let me share my screen. Cool. So I'm going to talk about some of the updates information we released a couple of weeks ago. It was August 21st. As Ramsey put basically on the chat sheet, put the link to the page on our website. We took the announcements. I'm not going to go through it quickly. I'm assuming it's going to be a lot of questions. I'm going to try to actually sort of give you some positive news and show you some of the stuff that we're actually working in the future, so that you kind of get an idea of why we do this update and where we're trying to get to. Like everything, all this information basically can be changed anytime. So we are currently working on this new sort of platform update. There might be some changes in some of the way that actually some of the stuff works, but pretty much this is the direction that we're actually sort of taking. Then we're going to talk basically quickly about the road ahead and a release plan in the product launches that we're going to do that we've done some of the summer, that we're going to do next sort of weeks and months coming in. So about a year and a half ago, we made the announcement in April 2022 of creating something called the Claris platform. Essentially, the Claris platform was some of the software that we already had or that we were building, some of the software that we had, which we renamed. And so we had this Claris platform, which essentially was the renamed version of FileMaker. So we had FileMaker Progo and Server, and when we had Studio and Connect on the side. And the issue that kind of created is all of the stuff that we're doing is we were trying to basically get people to be able to use all the software that we're actually creating as a company at Claris, to essentially be able to actually use what you have in FileMaker with Studio and Connect. Some of the stuff we were really trying to actually get to was the fact that we do not want to break any of the existing solutions or deployments that our actually customer have. One of the things we were trying to do on top of it is to make it easier for people to actually log into their system and kind of sort of clear out the whole user management system that we had in the background. So we had this Claris ID interface that we kind of used for Studio and for Connect. And one of the vision that we basically were looking for was to be able to actually have all of that under the Claris platform umbrella and be able to actually sort of move in that direction. Problem we actually created was we had, in that case, kind of two platforms. So when I make two platforms, it's more on the go-to-market messaging. On the messaging, we had kind of two platforms, but they were pretty much doing the same work. So on one layer, you had the FileMaker products that everyone uses currently, and you had Claris Connect that could actually work with your FileMaker files. And then to be able to actually use Studio, we required users to actually do a migration, move away from a FileMaker FMP12 files to what we call the Claris file. They were pretty much the same stuff. The only difference we relied basically essentially on the way that Claris ID was actually managing the user management. And then we had this tool called ESS Plus, which is basically the translation engine of trying to get Claris Studio inside of FileMaker, and a way to be able to actually migrate FileMaker tables towards Studio in some cases. So we're working with basically two platforms. And obviously, when we're trying to actually get people to understand that we don't want to break any existing solutions, and we're trying to make your life easier, when the first thing that you have to do is to take your solution that potentially, like Tony, could have 120 files, and ask you to actually migrate that and transform that into a Claris system and do the changes to all your user management. That is a painful amount of work that has to be done before anyone can see the benefit that potentially they could find in Connector Studio. So we kind of came in that this is creating friction both on the development side of it. In terms of the messaging around it, it's very confusing because we are telling everyone that we had two platforms, one that you love and you know how it works and you've already paid for it, and then the other one where you do not much about it in terms of new features. And on top of that, we're asking you to actually do the changes to actually get to that level. Hence, very hard to actually get people to actually move from one to the other. So did a bit of soul searching, and quite frankly, the one thing that we saw is, well, we know that basically people still love FileMaker and they still won't be able to actually use it. We're getting some traction from Claris Connect when we started giving it a free tier so people could actually start playing with it. In order to actually sort of get Studio inside it, we have to do the other way around. So we have to actually bring the work that we did to create this Claris platform, or like Claris Pro, back into FileMaker, so that people could start quickly leveraging Claris Studio data inside a FileMaker solution without having to actually redo everything from scratch. So this quarter is a quarter where we're going to start basically launching that. Essentially, most of the customers that have Fox access to Claris Studio inside the FileMaker solution are people that already got a Claris Studio account. So when we sold the Claris platform bundle, those type of customers will actually have quite an easy access to. And we are putting a plan in order to be able to actually give Claris Studio to as many as our customers, so they can start sort of playing with it, trying to find ways for Studio to be useful for them, and actually see how we move forward. So we are kind of moving away from having two platforms. We're putting everything into one platform, which we're going to call the Claris platform. Claris being the company that has a platform which is made out currently of FileMaker, Connect, and Studio, and potentially could actually have other tools being included in the Claris platform, but we're keeping the name FileMaker, Connect, and Studio to make everyone life a lot easier. By early next year, so probably around Engage, maybe a bit later to that, we'll actually remove completely this old Claris platform. So we're going to keep the two on the website for people to actually move from one to the other. So people that actually bought the Problem Server Circle licensing or CPB will still be able to actually use Claris Pro, Server, and Go. And then they'll be supplied with a tool that's going to migrate or convert a Claris file into an FMP12. Thankfully for the engineering, it's not as good for that for the rest of the company, but we don't actually have millions of customers who actually have this problem. So we'll basically work with a site of customers to actually make the transition back to a FileMaker-based environment with Studio and Connect on the side as easy as we can. And so this is the plan. So you're going to have a Claris FileMaker, Claris Connect, and a Claris Studio. And it's going to make it easier for us to actually sort of really work properly in the environments where we want to actually each of those products to actually work. Currently, one of the issues that we had on the Claris FileMaker side and the Claris server side stuff, we had to do some double the work. So every time we were doing a new version of FileMaker Pro, we had to do a new version of Claris Pro with Claris ID doing the stuff. So we were kind of a bit slow, basically, on actually bringing new features, or even what we actually aim to do the most that we can on the FileMaker side of it is what we call PSR, performance, stability, and reliability. The idea is to fix as much of the bugs inside the FileMaker code. Some of them have been there for a very long time. And at the same time, we are been updating third-party tools that we use inside the FileMaker to make the whole system work a lot better. So we have stuff like OmniRB, which is our one of part of our database engine, which is kind of old, and so we're doing some updates that we can actually bring some new version inside it. There's a lot of small tools that we use inside the product that we want to upgrade so that we can actually have less issues. When the problem that we always have is the fact that we are supporting quite a lot of OSs. We are supporting a lot of current FileMaker versions, so 21, 2023, 19, and stuff like that. And on top of that, we know that we have people that actually created files a long time ago on the FMP2 format, and since the early days of FMP12, a lot of those backend tools have actually changed. So we're trying to actually fix as much as we can without breaking your solution. And that's when some issues sort of come up, which are a bit of a pain, but until we actually can actually move those tools to the next version, it's still creating some issue in the background. So this is the cloud platform that everyone who pretty much has a annual contract will be able to actually get from early 2024. So some of the stuff that I've actually worked on recently. So we've been offering Claris Connect for every customer. So all you have to go to the website, you can sign up for the free tier. The free tier gives you about 500 API requests on a monthly basis. If you want more, then you can actually sort of purchase a bit more with the sales team. And what we'll be doing on Studio side is to give it free of charge for every customer on an active FileMaker 2023 license. And we'll pretty much give you everything that's there. We haven't really put any sort of limit for the time being, because we just want to be able to actually sort of get people to actually sort of start playing with it. Obviously, we know they're not going to do like billions of requests. So we kind of are kind of safe on the fact that we'll know it's not going to be really overused. And we'll give you some information in terms of what you can do with the free tier that potentially on the paid version or the add-ons version won't be there at first. So over the summer, we've been sort of releasing some updates. We had the launch of FileMaker Cloud 2023. That took a bit of time, more time than expected, because we still had a lot of users on older version of FileMaker. So we had a lot of customers still using FileMaker 18 on iPads. And because FileMaker 2023 only supports the last 4 versions of FileMaker 19, anyone before that had to be on its version to make sure they could actually move to the cloud. So we took a bit more time just to make sure that our customer could still use their system without having issues. But obviously, is we still know that some customers need to actually use old FileMaker solutions. If we want to move the whole platform forward, sometimes we have to tell customer maybe the cloud is not the right one. Go for a FileMaker server, and at least you'll have more freedom into the version that you can use. On the Connect side, so we are very shortly launching customer connectors, where people will be able to actually create their own connectors or import or use connectors coming from the community. That's going to make life of adoption a lot easier for a lot of people, because there's so many APIs out there. We can't provide connectors for all the sort of system out there. So we're giving you a nice sort of tool to be able to actually do it on the Connect website. It's kind of straightforward. All you have to do, well, there's a bit of JSON that has to be learned to be able to actually do that. You kind of have to understand how endpoints and API kind of works. But the one thing which is kind of cool is we're having a lot of partners that actually do know that. And some of them that have already created custom connectors. And so we'll have those on the website and the marketplace very shortly. So you'll be able to actually leverage the work that are done by other developers. There's going to be as well a Claris Studio connector inside of Claris Connect. So you'll be able to actually sort of get data or triggers or action from and to Studio into Connect. And you'll be able to do stuff as well with FileMaker on that front. There's various stuff that we're trying to make to work a bit better, like the trigger, the Claris Connect flow inside the FileMaker. And then a lot of work that we're doing in terms of fixing sort of smaller issues that we have on the FileMaker code that we're trying to actually sort of clean as quickly as we can. There's some stuff coming from the macOS side, some stuff coming from the Windows side. So we're trying to address all of that at the same time. So the thank you is not for me. What I'm going to do basically, because I'm a nice guy, is I'm going to show you some of the stuff that we've been working on so that you can get an idea of where we've been trying to actually sort of go to. So first one I'm going to show you is, my noise can go a bit on that way. So one of the things that people do, so this is an example file, the contacts file that we've been sort of giving out as a starter solution inside the FileMaker for a very long time. One of the things that in a lot of cases you actually have to do when you're trying to actually do PDFs is you need calculated data inside your layout. So the way to actually do it is multiple ways, but normally the way that most people actually do it is go into the database, go into a table, and then start creating those very nice calculated fields to be used for labels or any type of information. Issue with that is you have to actually store it in a table. It doesn't take any space, so it's not the data is not being sort of used by the system if you're not showing on the layout. But with the index, it's creating a bit extra work on top of that. The issue on top of it as well is we are kind of forcing you to create fields that are meant to be just on the layout. So we are kind of taking you a direction that is not really where you want to be. You don't want to create a calculation just to be shown on the layout. So what we did basically is to create something new, which we are calling a layout calculation. So it's kind of basically similar to like the merge field variable, but the way you'll be able to do it is actually have a calculation just on the layout. So if I give you an example of how that works, give it that one. So this is a couple of fields. Basically, my layout calculation is I'm using every type of function that I've got in my calculation engine, and I'm putting basically into my calculation engine, and it's going to basically be displayed on my layout when I'm actually need to actually be able to actually show it. So all the stuff that a lot of cases when you create PDFs and you have to actually store some of the data in field or like the calculated, with the layout calculation, you're not going to be able to actually have to actually store everything in your tables. You'll be able to actually only store it in the layout. And so the information basically is calculated only when it's actually showing on the layout just for that record. It's not pulling any data from anywhere else unless I want to do a very specific calculation. But at least now I've got my calculation on my layout. So all the extra stuff that I had, and this one is a small example, but there's roughly, I think, about 8 fields or calculation that have been specifically created just basically for the views on the layout and have no other point apart from that. So with this tool, you'll be able to actually do that directly. There's a couple of stuff that we fixed on top of that. So normally when you clicked on it, it refreshes, so it resizes to the whole size. So we're trying to actually fix this bug, but it's helping us actually realize that we have, like, within the UI, the way the objects are being sort of sometimes controlled by the UI, we have some bugs. So we're doing quite a bit of work to actually sort of redefine how fields behave on the layout and stuff like that. So it's helping us sort of fix more than just one issue. Originally, it was just basically to be able to do layout calculation, but the other work we're doing is around how fields and how labels are being sort of printed on the screen properly by the design service. The other one that I have, so is around the connector for Connect. Just going to go to a script workspace. So one of the things that we did find was version 1. Just to on version 1, when you're using the trigger Claris Connect flow, is we would ask you to actually type in the URL of the flow. So for people basically that can actually find it easy on the Connect page, it was kind of straightforward. But as we're trying to actually sort of get more customers to actually start using it and for people to actually have an easier life, instead of actually showing you the URL or you typing URLs, you'll basically be given a list of, so you'll be given access to your team. So you can be on multiple teams, and you'll be given the access of all the flows that actually are working on inside your project of your Claris Connect. So it's not working there because I can't show you all of that because not everything is completely working on how you want to show it. But this is pretty much what you'll be able to actually do. So just make it a lot easier for you to figure out what you want to do. And once you actually have that, and you've been able to actually give your flow a right name, you'll be able to actually sort of pick it up really easy from this place and use it in any of the scripts that you want to use in FileMaker. And the last one quickly is around so Connect. So as mentioning, basically, because you're going to be able to actually use within FileMaker your studio data, you'll easily be able to actually go into your database, go into relation, create a new table occurrence for your Claris data. So it's picking out basically the 4 that I have, click on OK, and then you have your studio data inside your FileMaker solution. So no need to do any migration, any other that, it's going to work quite swiftly for you. If I create layout, I think somewhere. It's a couple of stuff that we are working on, and it some of it annoys people, but some of it is, so whenever I look at a FileMaker file, whenever you're looking at a table or table occurrence, data has to be brought in from the data file into the cache file of the FileMaker Pro. And so the way we do it is we basically do a query and it brings 25 records. So you're looking on form, it's 24 record. If you've got a list view, it's pretty much everything you can see on the screen. So roughly about 40. And if it's stable, it's about 50 there. So we bring all of that data back. And for Studio, we have to do the same stuff. So we have to make a query to the Studio system to bring basically that data back. But because of the way that the Studio system is done, it's like one massive database for all our users. So the query takes a bit more time that they should do. Hence, you're having, when you're moving across a Studio sort of a table occurrence, this kind of query sort of system coming in. We're trying to actually clean that as much as we can so that it makes everyone's life a lot easier. And so this is pretty much the stuff that we're actually working on so that it makes it easier for you to start kind of leveraging Connect into your solution. leveraging Studio and trying to actually find all the goodness from those two sort of what I call add-ons to the FileMaker platform. Because in a lot of cases, they'll be able to actually get you to actually do some really nice stuff, either by leveraging other sort of database engines that could do some of the work for you, and not maybe doing everything inside of FileMaker. Because we do realize that you can't do everything in FileMaker. Like I was saying, there's some stuff in terms of calculation or processing a unit of power. FileMaker doesn't do that well because it's not originally completely based for that. But if using Connect, you could actually send your data to other systems. They can do the calculation for you. You can actually have everything brought back into a FileMaker system quite easily. So this is kind of the stuff that we're trying to get people to is we give you more tools to actually do, to be able to actually be a better developer. The way we gave you access to them originally wasn't the best way. So we kind of going back you around and saying, okay, we have those tools. We want you to use them because we know they're going to be useful for you. It's easier if we give them outright to you. You play with it, and then you can see all the benefit from it versus you're around. We're kind of telling you is you got to pay for it to see if it's going to bring value, which pretty much doesn't work in any environment. And for the Studio side, so there's a couple of days coming in. They're kind of minor, but they're pretty much around the layout and how sort of system works. But we're trying to make the whole sort of user experience of signing up to Studio, using Studio, getting data from FileMaker into Studio, having Connect, talking to Studio and FileMaker. We're trying to actually sort of get all of that work into sort of a very similar user experience so that moving from one to the other gets to be less complex than currently could be. So if you want more info as well on the website, there's a great video from Andy Lecates. He talks briefly on that on top of it, but if you want more information, you can find it here. And we're going to basically produce more sort of updates in the months to come to make sure that everyone knows what's going on and have a good understanding of where we're going and how we want to get there.
Great, thanks, Doug. That's excellent. Good to see that. I had a quick question. I'm sure other people have got questions. Is there a major difference between the calculation on layouts as opposed to using merge fields?
So merge fields
give you a bit more power, but is it very similar concept?
It's the same. We've just basically extended the calculation engine to actually be able to bring in all the function inside basically kind of a larger merge field.
Okay.
So you'll see basically what it has. It basically works like a merge field. We just have the function and then saying, okay, bring out all the functions of the engine and actually do the calculation there. And then pretty much everything. I mean, there was a couple of stuff that weren't working really properly on the ETS. So we had a lot of people on the ETS giving some feedbacks. I think a lot of it has been fixed. The issue that we basically finding where the resizing of the object is done basically based on the amount of not the data that's going to come out of it, but basically all the information from the merge field. That is bringing some other stuff that we've noticed that the layout doesn't do properly. So we're working on those as well, just to make everyone's life a lot easier. So.
Okay.
Just back on John's sort of comment on the flow steps. So it's a data API request. So you could have a flow that has hundreds of thousands of steps, but currently the measure is around the data API request. We do know that in some cases when you kind of go crazy with it, that's where basically you could overstep the limit. And that's where we're trying to figure out is we won't get people to actually start using it. There is a sales queue for people that really want to do a lot of usage of Connect, and we have different tiers so people can actually buy more. But the idea is let's get people to actually sort of start playing with it. If we do realize that people playing with it, just by testing it, get you 1,000 API requests on a monthly really, really quickly, and it's becoming an issue, then we'll just raise it so that people can actually sort of play with it. We're not going to go to like 1 million sort of API requests free of charge for everyone, but we're going to try to actually get to a point where people can actually test it, get to see the value of it, and then when they see the value behind it, then they can actually start being charged for it. like any business on the market.
I also had another question about user management and Claris IDs. Where are you sort of headed with Claris IDs and the current way of managing users?
So one of the things that we're trying to get to, which is might take sometimes, we're trying to actually sort of mimic what you can do in FileMaker inside the centralized environment, where the user management gets to be a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
The issue with FileMaker is so you have a server and you can have up to 200 files on that. You don't control really user management from the server side, you do it from the file side. So if you have the solutions and you've got to create more files, you kind of have to actually sort of do a lot of the work manually on the files to be able to actually do that. And in terms of security, basically it's a message that's kind of weird, because you're always saying is, yeah, your security is not on your system, but it's on a file-based environment. So with a system, with a centralized identification systems, we're trying to actually sort of come up with a way for all users and users to actually sort of have more control in a centralized environment of how to actually give responsibility and privileges to everyone. The Claris ID v1 that we have in FileMaker Cloud kind of was trying to actually do that. You create your users inside your Claris Cloud, your FileMaker Cloud account. You can create your groups. You have your licensing inside it. It can do some stuff around it. We tried to add some IDPs around it. So we had Microsoft and Okta, but there's a lot more out there and stuff like that. And some of the work that we're trying to do says, okay, we kind of know how the vision that we have long-term of user management. There's something that we want to do. There's something that we know we can't do. And there's some stuff that if we made it really easy for people to do it, they'll be happy to actually use it. So the idea is to kind of transform Claris ID so that it can be cloud-based or on-premise based. So people that basically have FileMaker server running on a Mac Mini inside their office and have 25 users could have a very stable on-premise Claris ID system where they could create the privileges, the users, track basically changes, and then we can get that system to talk back to our contract and licensing system to make sure that the usage that you're doing is properly done, that you've paid for your license, that you're using the amount of APIs that you want to do. If you want to upgrade or buy some stuff, it's done automatically. Just make everyone's life a lot easier. So we're trying to actually two-fight is make your life a lot easier. We try, like every company, we try to actually minimize as much as we can software piracy. We still know that there's a lot of pirated version of FileMaker on the planet. We can control as much as we can, but the long term is we have to actually sort of have to be a bit more stringent and actually kind of say, well, piracy is nice, but up to a point, and we can't actually have that. And on top of that is we want to be able to actually get people to be able to actually have a complete experience of the Claris platform on the free tier. So we want to be able to actually build a free FileMaker that people can start playing with. Currently, FileMaker system doesn't really, I mean, you have the tribe, but that's pretty much all we have. And on top of that, when we have new users, they haven't got many choices in terms of really be able to actually understand what they can do with FileMaker. They can go through the trial, is 45 days, be able to get somewhere. We have a great sales team, but in a lot of cases, the only thing they can actually tell those customers is, well, you don't know what you can do with it, go and speak to a partner. And that's really great if you can explain what you're trying to actually do with your partner. And in some cases, it's kind of hard. And like Ian was saying is, more and more cases of where it's going to be really hard to actually use AI and stuff like that is, how do you explain your needs to a software developer or even to an AI? So this is one angle that we sort of presented. One of the things that we're thinking of is if people can actually have a never to expire trial environment where they could leverage and start playing with FileMaker and Connect in Studio, be able to use all of that without pretty much any limits. Try to actually do what they can do with the whole platform, have an idea of what they want to build, and then realize that I'm going to have time to do it because I've got another job to do, I've got a proper business to run. Then to actually go to a partner is a lot easier because they've really understood what they could do with a platform. They can explain what they want to do, they can explain what they want to take that platform, and it works a lot better. And most of us who've been on the FileMaker world for a long time, it used to work a lot closer than that. People will actually get FileMaker, tried it, create the first version of something that they had to actually use, and eventually went to a partner to actually do something a lot bigger, or decided to actually have a developer internally to actually build that new software. Nowadays, not saying that the new generation lives in a hurried manner, but they don't actually even take the time to try to build something that they could be to someone else to actually really create it. I mean, we see a lot of people that basically try for a couple of weeks and say, oh, I want to do this and this and this and this. And you go, hang on, start from the beginning. What are you trying to solve? And start small and then grow. They just want to buy everything and have it straight away because they've been told by some of your companies, you can get that. Like for a long time, Salesforce was telling people, hey, you can build a system in a week and it's going to do all your sales environment and everything's going to rock and everything's going to work brilliantly. And then you get those guys and they go, well, no, it's going to take me a huge amount of time because I still don't know how to transform my thoughts, transform how I'm running my business into a software application. So we want to make it easier for people to take their time, to be able to actually play with everything. And then, like we've had for 20 years, afterwards going, okay, I know it's great for me. I'm going to have developers internally doing some of the work for me, or I'm going to basically ask a partner to be able to actually sort of do that.
Right.
Yeah, Carlos, you had a question, I think.
Yeah, a quick question. We use the bottom bar as our calculation just to show some data structure, or not data structure, data to the user. So we want to create a field, and we use the bottom bar to kind of do that for us. How is that going to be different from the layout calculation that you're having? Is it reading based on the current record, or is it going to work on a portal as well?
So it's going to work on the, so if you put it inside the portal, your lay calculation is going to do the same. So it does the same stuff, but instead of actually having it, so before the only option that you had is actually putting inside the bottom bar. And when you put it inside the bottom bar, in top of everything else, you're having to actually add all the stars and stuff like that. So it's putting more code inside the environment. And so it's taking FileMaker more time to actually load all of that information. So instead of actually using a bottom bar, which is not really there for, we give you basically this layout calculation to do the same. In a lot of cases, the same type of work. You won't be able to actually have you would be able to actually have emojis or icons, stuff like that if you wanted to, or any type of graphics. Yeah, it's just basically putting it somewhere that should have been there 20 years ago. Just no one thought that, hey, by the way, if we did this, I mean, we had it in the code. Some of it is just nothing. No one thought that it would be useful to actually have it now.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
I think you've got a question as well.
Yeah, listen, Doug, I love the direction of this stuff and bringing it back into an FMP12 kind of solution set. The initial reason why I got involved with FileMaker was actually the starter solutions, because the way I kind of learn stuff is I take the ruddy thing apart, try and figure out what the components are and do it. Challenge that I'm having at the moment is it's a bit like giving me a box of tools and saying this is a screwdriver and this is a hammer and this is a pair of pliers, and you can do this with a hammer and you can do this with the pliers and this is what you can do with a screwdriver. What I'm missing is an end-to-end set of sample solutions. So in what I do is I go and deal with companies, and 99% of the time the projects I get involved with are integration projects where the guy has wanted something from a website, normally a sale, which then needs to be integrated into an accounting system or a distribution system or whatever. With the tools that you've got in the toolbox and the business partners that you have got that are, I would imagine, chomping at the bits to help you out, I'm wondering whether there's mileage here in working with a few people and just getting some end-to-end solutions out. Like here's a sample solution which has a website that takes a sales order, B goes through Connect, C ends up in QuickBooks or in Xero or in Sage or whatever, but it's end-to-end. Here it is, it's free of charge, take it. At the moment, I can't see something like that or anything on the horizon where that's going to come about, or is that something you've got under covers?
So we've been trying to work on this for a very long time. One of the things that first came out a long time ago, I don't know if you remember, it was called the Business Productivity Kit, BPK. which is basically, we launched that, it was the FMP 7 first one. So you had your project, your contacts, and the various stuff. You could run a company and you could do a lot of stuff around it. And then we had the starter solutions where we had invoicing and stuff like that. The issue that we did actually came around was, so we're giving a starter solution to someone and we said, hey, it could do everything you need to, and you could leave it alone and it's going to be working fine. And then on top of that, we say with FileMaker, because everything could be iterated, you can actually grow that solution and make it your own. The problem is, where do you start on the learning side of it? So I give you a solution that has charts that can do maybe SQL queries for you in the background, and you give that to someone whose knowledge of FileMaker and in a lot of cases databases and queries is at 0. So you're giving basically a tool that is kind of complex, does a lot of stuff for them, but suddenly when they want to fix something, they're going to clear everything. And this is where it's getting the stuff which is really hard to be able to actually do, is how much of a technical file can we give them? The other one that we had, so when we had Nick Hunter doing the great solutions that we're giving to you, we had one on invoicing that was doing a really nice graph, but the query that he had created was is equal SQL and going through a lot of sort of tables to bring all the data to create a nice chart. And that was really nice. And we're telling people, and you can grow on top of that, you can add other stuff around it. What happened was people went into basically the layout mode, looked at basically the calculation, and then started sort of mucking around with it, hence killing it. And then they would go back and nothing was working. So they will call customer support or the SEs that we had at the time and say, hey, I've done this, your system is dead, it's broken. So we had to get the file, look at it and say, oh, you've actually broke it because you changed that. And we're like, well, I didn't know what I was doing. And we're like, okay, so we have to actually limit basically what you can do. So this is why a lot of the work that we are doing on the learning side of the company, we're trying to actually change it. The work that has been done on the certification is partly in that whole vision. We know that a lot of people don't want to do certification because they had to learn everything. And so we're chopping up in small bits, but we make sure that everyone learns. But it's easier that way for people to start sort of looking at you into part of the software or the platform and going, oh, actually, I understand what this is doing. I can do 2 hours of video and understand how this should be used properly. So we're trying to do some education that people, especially new users, get an understanding of what they can do with it. Then they can start playing with it. And eventually, like we've been, is like, we definitely know that it's not their job to be the software developer. They can decide to become a FileMaker developer, or they can go to a partner, or they can employ a developer internally. But we're trying to make that tool sort of easier for people so that they don't actually mess up some of the solutions that we can actually sort of give them.
I guess the challenge that I've got is I think a citizen developer is going to struggle with whatever you give them. Right? Yeah. The solution set kind of sparks the interest of, I wonder if it can do this. But the likelihood is, I mean, it's the same in my system. Whenever Sage provide a demo company, right? Now, the demo company is something that somebody else has set up. It's got a product in it, it's got sales orders in it, it's got purchase order in it. But if somebody doesn't actually understand what those things are, he can see that it can be done. He doesn't need to know how. He will then engage with somebody who can do it. The challenge that I've got as a developer, my suggestion here is these end-to-end solutions that I call them should be prototypes or templates that you bring your partners up to speed with. So that when an end customer says, "Oh, that looks pretty good," you can then the business partner has got something that is end-to-end and say, "Look, if you want this, take it off the shelf. This is what it is," and that will generate licenses for Claris. But when the guy says, I actually needed to do this, 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 and that, that'll then generate consultancy and extra licenses. But unless I've got something to give him, I won't be able to fan the flames for him to want to buy more. And at the moment, I've just got a box full of tools. And I'm saying to him, I can build you, it's like a bucket full of Lego pieces. I can build you this, I can build you that. I can't show him the Star Wars Death Star and say, look, do you fancy that? And say, yeah, I want that in red. But I've got to show it to him in grey first before he buys it in red. And that's the challenge I've got, because I think in the nicest possible way, I don't have any idea of how long it's going to take me to get to where I want to be. Is I want to get to the stage where I'm using Connect, I'm using Studio, and I'm using Claris to say, here's a website order going to Sage. I want that as a end-to-end kind of off-the-shelf solution as an SBA. But I don't know how much time it's going to take me to get up to date with the tools. I don't know how long it's going to take to put that scenario together, and furthermore, to make it available to the channel. That's a challenge I've got, because the investment in that, I'm wondering whether it's going to make it worthwhile.
Can I just jump in here? It's great stuff. It's really good discussions. We're almost at 9 o'clock. I know Rosemary's posted a survey link in the chat about Doug's talk, which he'd love us to fill in, because it helps us get talks like this in the meetings and things. So please do that. I know there's more questions for Doug here. I just wanted to get that in before we did that. I can see Gary wants to say something, and Carlos wants to say something, and maybe
Rosemary should go first.
and I also know that Rosemary is somewhat tired and needs a break.
And actually, I just was going to say thanks, everyone. Great meeting. And I got to run to another meeting because.
Oh no, that's not so good.
Yeah.
Good luck, Rosemary.
Wonderful. No,
yeah, all in a couple of months. Bye.
Okay. See you soon.
I'll just say a quick thing. I think, yes, where the platform's going, the announcement, absolutely. I think it's given a succinct sort of setup and an approach. So I don't think there's a concern with that, and I think everyone agrees here that this is the right way forward. No, there's not a negative thing at all. I think with the use of the platform, I speak from lots of experience from the point of a freemium version will go a country mile to get in that platform in that company. The problem I've had with the numerous companies I've done work with to try and get FileMaker in there, I can build most systems with FileMaker. People know my history with what I do with it, so I know I can leverage the tool. What Ara's talking about is fine, okay, as a point of a quick, easy way to then demo. So I totally agree with that as well. So, but I think there's the point that most companies don't know what they want until you've shown them it. And that's the problem. And I've done this numerous times with demos, trials, and so forth. And the issue you have is by the time you get them engaged in the platform, the trial's ended. So you're going back to FileMaker to get an extension to the trial. And then you go, right, that's fine. And then you build the first module, which gives them what they want, like a sales invoice, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. And they go, oh, that's great, but can I have a feed from this? And you think, well, okay, that's an API from that module. I need to build that and put that in there. All trials extend, run out again. And that's the problem. The 14-day, 30-day, 6-month trial is not enough at times, because you're absolutely right, Doug. The end user, most of the time, will lose steam, change the project direction. They've got a vision to then change their implementation from A to B to this new system. And then something else that's business critical comes up and that gets parked. Now, if I could give them a free version and go, I can build you a simple tool that does this, this, and this. And the classic one is FileMaker is the best tool on the planet as middleware to link system A to system B. We all know this. This is what we do on a day-to-day basis. So I've got a scenario at the moment with someone that they're going, I want data from this system here and I want to get it in there and I want to aggregate it and I want to get this stuff from Google Sheets and I want to make sure there's all links up. I'm like, well, FileMaker's your tool. And they're like, well, show me. And I'm like, I have no easy way of showing you that at the moment, because yes, I could build it on a trial, but I can't prove I can get that done within that time period. So that's always the challenge. Lots of companies have had the same problem. I think the Claris ID is a solution. My point would be, you could give the tool as a single user access. I've said this time and time again, a single user can't even have server, can't even host the damn thing. All you can do is open it on this device and then use it. That's it. So to me, that's a safe environment to offer a free tool, in my view, because what they're going to do with it, as soon as you give them the power of FileMaker, they're going to go, oh, Bob in accounting wants access to that file. Need a license. Sorry, you got to buy it now. But a single user tool that can do stuff. Okay, yes, smart developers as we all are, we can export data from one tool, put it on a central share, import it to the other one, and they've got a free tool, they've got a free tool, they can link it together. I get where you're going, Doug, but the likelihood of that being deployed to 20 users, 30 users is no developer's going to do that work. I would never do that work. It'd just be, right, you've got the proof of concept, put your hand in the pocket now. Now you've got to buy it. Now, I can't see end users having the technical expertise. And I don't want to belittle the developers that are around here today. We're all intelligent people. What FileMaker 3 was offering us as a suite of product, I learned and picked up and ran with it. I probably learned every feature in FileMaker version 3 because there were 200 of them. We now have an option of 10, 20,000 commands and options we can run at this thing. And once you start including the web and external data sources, it's limitless. We know that. Connect is trying to build that gap of the fast way of delivering web technology into the platform, but it is limitless. So it's the point of no end user is going to pick that up and then go do the certification exam and then say, brilliant, I'm now a certified developer, I'm going to build a solution. Because the best way in the world, they still need to talk to a partner because they haven't got the years of business experience that we've all got building systems and knowing the pitfalls and the problems and the headache. They will go down a path and then they'll still call a partner anyhow because they'll get it wrong. They just will. So for me, the freemium version needs to come, and I'm concerned with where the platform's going for that, because freemium was close, and to be honest, I think it's now just been parked and put way back with what's going on with the announcement. I think the announcement's a great thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I think the freemium version is something that is absolutely missing from the suite.
And we're working on it.
I know you're not. I know you haven't down tools and said that's it. But I listened to Andy Lecate's presentation. There was a section in there where he just goes, "Well, the freemium, we're still working on it, and we're trying to work out how to make it work." We were close. It was sort of announced. We were about 9 months to a year on from when it was announced, and now we're back to where we started again. And I get it. I understand you cannot allow software to be out there for free. You're running a business. Totally understand it. But I'm surprised it's becoming that complicated. That's what's getting my head. I don't mind if it's a slightly reduced feature set. I bet that it can only save data for 3 months, 6 months, and then it auto wipes itself. I don't care. But pick a time frame that's in the future. Use it for a year, and it auto purges all the data inside it, and deletes all the TOs. I don't care. That could be a guideline we could work with if we know the time frame is long enough. But I don't know.
Gary, we're over time. Talking of time and time frame, I noticed that Carlos has got his hand up still. So should we just take Carlos's comment and then move to the virtual bar and switch the recording off after that?
Yeah, my thing is very quick. Just to add to all this stuff, I know it's frustrating for all developers and also for new developers. There's no way for them to say this is the best practices for the software. You know, you have SQL, you have all these other companies that tell you this is, if you're gonna do a portal, and this is the best case, this is the best performance scenario that you need. I think that there should be something like that for us, well, for FileMaker to say, hey, if you're gonna do this type of procedure, this is the best performance, and this is the best way to build it. Like right now we have UUIDs, UUID numbers. You know, some of them work faster than others when you have a lot of tables here and there. But what is it documented by FileMaker saying this is the best way for you to do a relationship? You know, and teach the younger people coming up, saying this is the boundaries of creating a really solid software. Because sometimes you go into these companies and you walk in there and you're like, a relationship by a name. You're like, whoa. What do I do with this thing? And it's like, oh no, it's doing, based on that, it's doing a calculation lookup to get the ID. And it's like, okay, so now it's even worse. Now if you misspell the name, you get the wrong number. You know, so I come across all those things, and I think that there's no really good foundation for some of these younger developers. And I just wanted to get that input in there. That's it.
Thank you, Carlos. I mean, that is an interesting point, but it's also a slight can of worms because FileMaker's always had more than one way to do things. So I don't know, getting the best way of doing something is a difficult one. I think you won't find developers that agree on that.
I think it's that thing of, yes, you can go with what we do here, is the fact that those comments of what Dom asked earlier, well, how's the best way to do calculations? I think that's it. There was 4 or 5 people that gave different answers. The point is there's nuances, there's reasons for what we recommend. I think Carlos, you're right. I think there are best practices. The downside is it's on a forum and you've got to go hunt for it, and you have to find out, does that fit my business need? Is it the same as what I'm running? So I think that's the challenge, because FileMaker does offer multiple ways of doing things.
But it does tie into what Ara was talking about as earlier, saying, well, okay, if there's a good way of doing it, can we see what that good way of doing it is? And if we got an example of that good way, then the upcoming developers can see that and can get on board and say, right, okay, yeah, I'm going to do it that way.
I agree with what is the way that I can start it. You know, maybe there's a little file that says, you know, I know FileMaker, I've been doing FileMaker since FileMaker 3, and you know, so I know everything changes, everything comes across, but there's not, you know, I have new developers that come in and I'm like, well, this is the best way based on my experience. You know, but you know, there should be something, you know, in the database form that says this will perform better, even though there's 3 or 4 ways how to do it. But FileMaker says this is the best performance you'll get from this file, at least for small processes, small modules. That's just my idea.
Yeah, Tony.
Thank you. So Carlos's comment caused quite a bit of excitement in the chat, and it's a topic near and dear to my heart. I think that I've been trying to trick people into volunteering to show their code. It's rather brave. Maybe they, you know, join the witness protection. I think it's a terrific meeting topic for anyone who's brave enough to say, look, this is my implementation of a pick list, which is, you know, and this is why I use it instead of a value list. And you know, in a friendly fashion, just thrash it out. This is my implementation of sorting. I just posted something on FM Soup with a stacked find implementation. Whatever the heck a stacked find is, you can find it under the topic stacked find, because I think that this is an incredibly healthy thing. And even just to tie into a previous conversation about sample files, I do think that the sample files are very valuable. If I was Claris, I would keep them simple. And then the more complicated stuff, I keep that separate, because big systems are always going to be different, in my opinion, with all due respect. Every single big system is just going to be highly customized and really tough to do. FM Starting Point, far as I know, comes closest. But long story short, I think that if there's anyone anywhere on the planet willing to put some code samples out, their best practice implementations, I can find 2 or 3 user groups that would snap up that presentation in a heartbeat.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can show you how not to do it.
Well, that's always a good thing, Gary.
Are people raising their hands to be on the committee to review the code, or are people raising their hands to present the code to be reviewed?
I don't know. We're running out of time, and we can move this into the virtual bar. But just briefly, I think, Gary, I don't know if you're in agreement, but I think it would be a really useful session to have.
Absolutely,
maybe regularly. Just, you know, present some code. Who's going to be brave enough this event to present?
I've got enough code.
I really like the idea, Tony.
Yeah. I think it's a good idea, and I think everyone should comment on that and do that. That's fine. If people aren't happy to show their code, that is the purpose of the virtual bar afterwards. That is why we have it, because we record up to a point, and then if you want to show stuff that you don't want to go publicly, but you still want the forum to have a comment on it, that is exactly what that is for. So I would urge you to say, come forward with this. I agree. If we can do it as part of something we can publish and push out, great. But if you're not happy to show your code in that respect, there's a way to do it without showing it.
We've got options.
Yeah.
Ara, is that a quick point, or is it a virtual bar point?
Mucho quick. Right. And this one's at Doug as well, just to have on his radar. One of the biggest problems that I have is performance, the same as everybody else, on the desktop. Right, so FMP is fine. You do a bit of work, and all of a sudden the thing just grinds to a halt. And the magic mushroom here is PSOS. Until you find out this lovely script that you wrote doesn't ruddy well work on it on the server. So that has been the biggest bane of my life. So I'd much rather not have the facility, arguably, than actually have it all the way across the platform. Because what that then allows me to do is to say, look, if I've done it, you can have it through WebDirect, you can have it on FMGo, you can have it on your desktop. At the moment, I'm spending a bucket load of time with plugins and everything else trying to get something that works on the PSOS. But I'll just park it there because the beer is beckoning, I think.
As Dom picks his beer up straight away. Well done, Dom.
Nice one. So I think if you're happy at this point, Gary, we'll turn the recording off and go into the virtual bar if everyone's happy with that. But don't disappear because
no, I think there's plenty to talk about, and that's fine. I just want to thank everyone for everything, certainly the speakers and
absolutely
comments. So we can't do this without your input. So thank you very much.
And thanks for everyone who's chipped in and made some comments and put some points of view forward. It's all great stuff, and this wouldn't be as good without it. So thank you all very much.